Well, welcome to Economics Happy Hour. My name is Matt,
And my name is Jadrian.
And I'm Brian.
and we have Brian on the Susquehanna University campus this morning, which is a rarer time for us to be talking. But the Nobel Prizes were just announced, and we wanted to come to you right away with the podcast about our instant reaction. And so, Brian, you are about to talk to some high school teachers today.
That's what I've been told.
That's
Yeah.
what you've been told. A couple different presentations. And Jadrian, you're getting back from the West Coast.
West Coast. I'm about to go talk to some former high school students. So
Awesome.
Brian and I are not that much different.
Very
So
nice.
it is 7:30 in the morning. So with that, Jadrian, what are you drinking?
I've got a nice cup of hot coffee. I think I have a new bag of the coffee that my friends in State College roast. So it's
Right.
delicious.
Nice. Brian?
I'm drinking a bottle of premium vodka. Just Dasani water. Matt won't give me alcohol on campus.
I don't know. Yeah, we do have some. I probably wouldn't restrict you if you really wanted it. But, and I have Diet Sam's Cola. You know, inflation on soda is a real thing. So Diet
Right.
Sam's Cola for the caffeine in a mug for DSF Wealth Management Group. Gift from alum Ryan Franks. So shout out to Ryan if he listens. I don't know
Very
that
good.
I don't know that he does, but
But he should.
he should if he doesn't. But okay, the Nobel Prize was announced, and we were joking initially on it's unfortunate given one of the names where nobody's certain exactly how to pronounce. But so the three winners were Daron Acemoglu. Jadrian, is that how you would have said it, or what's your pronunciation?
I say it very similarly. I was quickly Googling. There's actually a video of him introducing himself and saying his name. But again, I didn't get a chance to listen to it. I was only listening while y'all started the podcast. So I didn't want to get distracted. I have always said Acemoglu, but I don't think that's correct. I think it's Acemoglu.
Daron.
It's Daron. It's
That's not a
Daron,
yeah.
and we all know who he is.
Yeah.
I'll say of the three, that one's not surprising. It was
Yeah.
just a matter of when he'd win.
His
Mhm.
co-author on Darren's big book, Daron A. We'll go.
Okay.
Simon Johnson, and then the third was James Robinson. So Daron and Simon are from MIT. James is from University of Chicago, and the official tagline on the announcement from the Nobel Prize Committee for Studies of How Institutions Are Formed and Affect Prosperity.
And I think you guys probably could have bet money and won on where they came from. Because
I think I
based
probably
on,
could have narrowed it down to like five choices, I think.
oh yeah. Well, based on your big econ podcast
Yeah,
a couple times ago, this is two MITs and a Chicago.
they come. Yeah, we've had some interesting comments on that. So thanks to those who are commenting. Like, is it is this restricting the flow of ideas? I thought was one of the really good comments, and a couple comments on there that that quite frankly I still need to reply to, but it's been a little chaotic here. But thank you to those who have been leaving some thoughtful comments on either on the Substack or on the YouTube channel. It's been fun to read. So first thoughts, what are your first thoughts on about this prize?
I happened to be up very early today. I woke up extra early to get ready to come do this, and I thought they came out at like 4:30. So I was like ready. I was up at 4:30 looking at the announcement, and I still had to wait an extra hour.
Oh,
So Brian, I'll say my initial thoughts. Matt, I'll hear yours. My initial thought was when I saw Acemoglu, no surprise. I think he is regularly listed as a contender for the Nobel Prize, and honestly, he could win it for other things too. His contribution on on labor markets and automation and skills and stuff, like he's got so many things that he does. Not surprised. I'll say overall, semi-surprised. I don't know how much you followed the previous announcements from last week. There was a lot of talk about AI winners and physics and chemistry.
Yeah.
I was I was sort of thinking they were going to go a whole theme on all of them and hit like some skill bit like David Otter type stuff, but they chose not to. So not surprised by Daron Acemoglu. I will say I'm a little surprised by the topic.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, they've done institutions already. That's
Yes.
yeah. I was looking back through, and I'm like, didn't Douglas North do institutions? And I mean, they mentioned the contribution with history and how it, they kind of used history as a springboard to get into institutions.
Mhm.
But I remember doing institutions in grad school, a long time, well, 20 some years ago now. And it's like, wow, I can't believe this is the topic that they're going with. And yeah, that was a big surprise to me. And I thought, boy, it seems like they missed on a couple of people. And maybe they just figure, well, there's, people doing AI stuff are still pretty young, and they've got their chances coming up.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I've heard the names people would ask, any predictions? I'm like, my only predictions are what other people say. I mean, I don't know who's going to win in any given year. I love the idea on having something I think the institutions are so important and so kind of the general idea of institutions are so like life and death. Yeah.
And I heard they're life-changing.
Well, yeah, I think
that was the
institutions,
last I got.
life and death, right? I mean, literally the rules of the game, the laws, the private property, free markets. One of my favorite images ever to show in class, or even showed them on several videos over time, is the North Korea, South Korea photo. I mean, it's, that is, I think that's one of the most striking photos really ever taken. Where
Matt, for people who are not watching or don't know, describe that photo for people.
So a satellite photo of North Korea and South Korea at night. So 1953, it's the same country and they all have the same institutions. North Korea becomes essentially communist, and South Korea, mixed market, fair amount though, private property, free markets. South Korea is now thriving and North Korea is starving. And the photo shows it at night, and South Korea is lit up and North Korea is dark. And it's a striking photo of how much institutions indeed matter.
Yeah, there's that tiny. So when I show it in class, I play it up. Some of the kids have a sort of a clue what's going on, but it's like you've got this bright light in the middle of what looks like a sea of nothing. There's a tiny little prick of light in what is North Korea, which is Pyongyang. But then it looks like you have this island of light. And I'm like, no. Then I overlay an outline of the countries on top of that photo, and they're like, some of the students are like, oh my golly, this is unbelievable. Those are the ones. Of course, those are the students. You're happy that they sort of connected the dots, but it's a stunning picture.
So for the general idea, and I mean their work wasn't necessarily specifically on that, but I mean they're
right.
The idea of how institutions matter is incredibly important, and the book Why Nations Fail is one of the bigger ones on this. You mentioned AI, and while this is not an award for AI, Acemoglu, I'm probably going to pronounce his name like 4 different ways during the podcast. Daron, I need to just say Daron A. He's been discussing a little bit more about AI recently, including like just if you do a quick search of him in AI, there's no guarantee it's going to raise wages and various things like that. Is that specifically his area, or is this, hey, he's an economist, he's going to give his opinion on things? I don't know that it's really a research area.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of bringing it back to the institutions. It's fascinating to see how, if you look at Adam Smith writing about this in Wealth of Nations, and we're still talking about the same thing. And, we're giving these major awards to people who are talking about why are some countries rich and some countries poor, which is Wealth of Nations, boiled down into its essence.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the thing that I had saw that surprised some people was that we have had essentially a string of economic historians, which is not that that's not important, but I feel like I find economic history fascinating, but it's not. I don't think it's not normally what we would consider like sort of the cutting edge of our field. But I guess at the same time, the Nobel Prize is not supposed to be for economics; is more of a career award, right? But these three are economic historians. I mean, you could argue Claudia Golden was an economic historian,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Like looking at the impact of women labor market outcomes. Bernanke's work on the Great Depression is an economic
Mhm.
history. We sort of hit, actually, I guess that's three in a row, right? That are sort of economic historians in different ways. Um, I wonder how much of this is, I mean, it's obviously institutions, and I think that's important, but sort of in this same causal inference, how do we measure the impact of something using historical data, but trying to do it causally rather than with correlation? I mean, like I have no strong qualm. Like I don't have a problem with these three. Like I think definitely deserving.
Yeah. Did you have I don't know, Jadrian, how much you thought about if I got to choose it this year, I would have chosen somebody different. And I'm sure if I was asked, I must give a choice on somebody. I mean, I probably would have said John List just because I know
Oh,
John
yeah.
List.
Well,
Yeah.
you you have a dog in that hunt.
But the but
So I'd say,
this is
well,
I
okay,
agree it's deserving, but I'm
yeah.
curious of who you would have given it to.
Well, okay. Well, so think about this. Maybe we should make sure that we let everybody know the rules of the Nobel Prize. 'Cause I think that's important. It can only go to at most three people. It doesn't have to be split in thirds. It can be split like half and then quarters. But it can't be more than three people. They have to be alive.
Wow, that's a big one.
That's the big one, right?
Yeah.
It cannot be awarded posthumously. Um, so right, like we can't add a fourth one. So in some senses, right, you got to take somebody out to add somebody into it. Um, if you stuck in the institutions, why are some countries rich, some countries poor? Raj Chetty could be in that space, sort of not a social mobility, where you're living. It's not necessarily like rich and poor in the sense of like I guess countries, but I guess you could be in that same sort of why are some people rich, some people poor space.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I
they
see.
go a
I
little
don't
bit
know a
more
lot in this.
on because it seems like he's going almost within country. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
little bit within. The announcement is somewhat interesting. I mean, it's talking specifically about, countries because the richest
Mhm.
20% of the world's countries are now around 30 times richer than the poorest 20%.
Yeah. I mean, these three work together. So, right, like I would say that's something that is different than I think you've seen in some of the previous ones where you might have like two co-authors and then a third one that's in the same space. These three have papers together. Like they actually are sort of I mean, Darren has the most papers of probably any economist. Um, right, but those three names pop up on lots of well-cited papers working
Yeah.
together. So
Mhm.
I don't know that I could come up with I don't know that I could come up with a fourth person who would replace one of these three.
In that
And really,
space.
when I say replace one of these three, I mean replace either Johnson or Robinson, because like you're not going to replace Acemoglu.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's fair. The It's interesting. I think this part of the announcement for those who haven't read the announcement but are listening, I think is kind of interesting that they were looking at European colonization, large parts of the globe, and the differences in prosperity that based on the systems. So the places that were, relatively speaking, the richest at their time of colonization are now among the poorest. In addition, they used mortality figures for the colonizers, among other things, and they found a relationship that the mortality rates at that time, the higher the mortality rates were among the colonizers, the lower today's GDP per capita. And then, of course, they say, why is that in here? The answer is settler mortality, how dangerous it was to colonize an area, affected the institutions that were established. And you could imagine if those who are going to a new area were thought, oh, okay, we know we'll live for 80 years, right? You would set up maybe different, more stable institutions than if, taking an extreme example, if life going from 80 years life expectancy to 30 years life expectancy, then all of a sudden there's not much of a personal return on that kind of investment. So that I think is kind of a fascinating one. That's part when I had read people predict that it could be Daron A. That I'd read that before and I always found that pretty fascinating.
I remember doing stuff like this in undergraduate school, but not in economics, like in history and even a humanities class. They brought a speaker in and was talking about the impact of certain not types of colonization, but who did the colonization. So was it France? Was it Britain? Was it the Dutch? I think have a particularly bad record on this. And I think with France, you've got Haiti is a disaster, Vietnam, communism and civil war there, and just who is bringing the institutions. I mean, they're going to have this sort of their plan of colonization may be somewhat uniform. So they go to these different places, and it's like, oh, here's how we're going to do colonization, versus what the British did or what other nationalities did. And I think what they're saying here really lines up pretty well with that. Like who is doing the colonizing, brings their own set of institutions into those areas, and that can certainly impact things. But that gets back to Jadrian, what you were saying about the history angle on this, and it's there's a lot that underlies. And as economists, I think we can let the math run away with us and ignore some of the history and what's really affecting we take the social science out of it and make it more math.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like these that are. I like these that tell the stories a little bit better. And I mean, you made a good point, Jadrian, earlier on it's been, you could argue 3 in a row, economic history. I think a lot of the studies that really get cited aren't, I mean, there are some just pure econometricians or modelers who might, but a lot of them will have, they find this new method, this new model, this new way to, we were talking about Scott Cunningham and the new econometric methods or finding causality and all of the things. But they're applying it to solve interesting problems. I mean, the method in and of itself won't be isn't as relevant sometimes as thinking about how to solve a particular problem on it.
So you said, who did you say you might have awarded it?
Oh, I'm only half jokingly, but I think John List is one that I've met.
Oh, we were talking about somebody else last night.
Who else was it? I can't remember.
For AI.
Oh no, they were saying Susan Athey.
Oh, right.
Who I just saw her talk and thought she was absolutely brilliant. One of the smartest discussions I've ever heard, and I think those are two who will get it someday. So that's
well, I mean, this was one of the arguments I saw online was that Claudia Golden winning it alone last year is a little surprising, given that her and Larry Katz do so much together. That she won a very specific award that I think leaves open the door for Susan Athey, Larry Katz, some sort of how AI technology, how that has changed labor markets. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's coming in the future. I mean, an experimental one. We haven't had an experimental winner in a very long time, right? I think.
Yeah.
I'd have to look at the list. I don't know. Matt, I mean, this is more your space.
Kahneman won in 2002, I think.
He won with
Kahneman and
right?
Vernon Smith, right? Those two won in 2002, I believe it was.
Is that your last?
And then would you say that Thaler, would you call him an experimentalist? I mean, he was behavioral, but did a lot of experiments. Or Thaler, I never recall.
I would say he falls in that classification.
But
I'm scrolling through the list to see. I'd give it Thaler. Yeah, I mean, behavioral is not. I mean, he's done
a number of experiments, right? I mean, throughout his time here. But mentioning the three as a pair, going to Google Scholar for Simon Johnson, his three most cited works, two of them are with Robinson and Daron A.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
The colonial origins of comparative development and reversal of fortune, geography and institutions in the making of the modern world income distribution. The third one in the middle, it's from the Handbook of Economic Growth, and it just says, it just has Acemoglu as the author there. I'm like, okay, I don't quite understand how this is all working, but then he has a separate one. He has separate ones.
He probably wrote a chapter that's probably the chapter title in the handbook, which was authored by Acemoglu. That's my guess. I don't know for sure, but usually, like, if you're a chapter editor, then you're not, like, you get kind of weird. Google Scholar gets weird on those.
Sure.
It's probably that.
And if you look at Robinson's, all of the top ones, boy, yeah, it's his top 9 are all co-authored with Acemoglu. That's very, very much collaborative.
I think that's, to me, that's super interesting, because, like, in the past, it has been these sort of bundles that they have put together.
Yeah.
These three seem like, I mean, it's really their work over the past 30 years.
Yeah, the collaborative nature of that work has produced something really great, which I think you guys maybe talked about this at some point in the past as well, about, specialization in economics is something that sometimes economists don't really pay attention to. And you have these three people working together. They have different capabilities and different specializations, and they generate these wonderful and really impactful outcomes.
We keep going back to this idea of Google Scholar accounts. Maybe we should look at ours and see just how far away we are.
Oh, it'll be depressing. Yeah, but Robinson has 120,000 citations.
That's all.
Awesome.
That's all.
Acemoglu has 247,538.
Hey,
sheesh.
But I mean, I think if we go to Johnson, it's only at 89,000. I'm at like 3% of his or something. I'm like, hey, that's not too bad. I'm
gonna make this worse.
Take 3% of the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, really. 3% of the payout.
Acemoglu currently has 25 papers in Google Scholar that are tagged as 2024.
What? All right, so then that also,
but there were, right, some of them are working papers, but some of them have been published in 2024.
Like, I mean, I guess that's what happens when you work with other people. You can increase your productivity
quite a bit.
I mean, that's so many papers.
My guess is it's probably, as you're saying, if some have been published this year and then some are working papers, it might be a paper a month on average, because some of
There's a lot of MBERs in here, though. There's a lot of working papers in here.
Yeah. But a month.
But they're still working on them, which is just astounding.
Yeah, I don't think it's 40-hour work weeks for
no, probably not.
This is a passion that it's what you wake up, what you love to do. And the old joke about MIT has flexible work hours. They don't care which 80 hours per week you work, right? I mean, like so that's pretty fascinating. It's pretty fascinating. But the
2023, 33 papers.
Oh,
okay.
Gosh.
Yeah. That's
some are in different languages. Some of these are. This is a wild list to look at.
No, that's
Matt and I are still crunching away on our paper.
Hoping for the one this year. No, it'll be. But so overall, I mean, it's pretty fascinating, and I'm quite frankly, this is one of the parts we're all busy with, either teaching schedules or administrative schedules, and I'm somewhat familiar with their work, but I'm not an expert on any of these three authors' works. Looking at some of the titles of like the Property Rights and Finance in the AER, it's a 20-year-old paper. I just see the title on that and I'm like, I want to read this paper. And it's one that's just Johnson. Well, it's with other co-authors, but not
I
Not
will
even.
say I bought Why Nations Fail. I actually thought I owned this, and I was going back through. I definitely have never read it because it's 500 pages, and I usually remember the thicker econ books.
Mm.
If I own it, it might be somewhere. But currently, as the three of us talk, it's only $10 on Amazon in a paperback. Well, I
You
guess
better order
we can
now.
we can use this as a measure, right? What's the Nobel effect on Amazon prices?
Yeah.
Well, there's that, but there's also they did a story on NPR the other day about a small publisher who had somehow gotten the rights to, I think, last year's Nobel Prize in Literature winner,
Okay.
and how it changed the lives of the publisher. That they were just kind of paying the bills, and then all of a sudden they had so much income coming in, they were able to actually rent an office instead of working out of their house. And they said that the impact is expected to be multiple
Mm,
decades because they they had the publishing rights to the Nobel Prize winner in literature.
nice.
It's kind of crazy.
Speaking of other Nobel Prizes, how do y'all keep up at all with the other Nobel Prizes? I
Uh,
see them, but I don't like dig in. I don't read like any of the reports or the popular. I don't know what the popular information, I think is what they call it.
like the physics one always fascinates me because it's usually so theoretical that I can't imagine where this would come up in real life.
Hmm.
But then, immediately there's another story right after that one that makes me forget why did they people win it in physics?
No. I I see the announcements, and that's about it. And so I'd known that they were coming. There was quite a bit on AI here
Yeah.
recently.
The literature one
Maybe.
is actually kind of interesting too, because
Okay.
sometimes they are prizes that are awarded to people in other parts of the world that really opens the doors to that country's literature for just
Hmm.
average people like
Yeah.
me. Um, but then again, sometimes sometimes the winners get it for these totally esoteric ways of writing. Like this one, I think it was 2 years ago, the winner, um, their major work had no punctuation in it. It was like 200 pages with no periods or commas.
I've I've
How
heard
could
of
you,
books like this, and I
that's
don't know how.
no, I don't want to read that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't.
Like on top of that, like imagine like just the copy editor's job of
Oh,
having to like completely flip your brain to say like this is the style instead.
oh, that's tough. Or you just don't have a copy editor. You don't
Yeah.
have to worry about it.
Any any thought? I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to think of what pop culture relates to these
Ooh.
three. And
Were there any Nobel Prize winners in like The Big Short?
they put in
Bernanke's in there, isn't it?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Thaler's.
Okay. So there we
Um,
go.
so the blackjack scene where uh Thaler's describing, people betting on the outcomes of the blackjack bets
Mhm.
as a way to be a parallel to the wagers on the mortgage markets.
So you don't think Selena Gomez will win a Nobel Prize in economics
Well,
for her appearance in that?
we'll see. That she could be next,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, she
So
could be
all
next.
right. So who do you think will be? I mean, you've talked about people maybe who have won, who haven't won that could. Um, what about someone? Is there anybody like really off the wall that you think?
So I'll say an off the wall one that it won't happen, but I think it should happen. I think Cohen and Tabarrok should win for how much they have brought economics to the mainstream and they'll never
Mm.
win for this because it's not really what the prize is. But in terms of how many people digest economics knowledge, um,
Throw the two of them in there with our favorite with the Mancu's favorite. I was gonna say our favorite textbook, the Mancu book.
Yeah.
the
Interesting.
well, it's not the textbook, I think, as much as I think it's
Or
their.
even his blog, right? I mean, like,
I
but
think
even
I think
Mancu's
it's
blog,
more the
right? Like,
blog.
Mhm.
That thing is, I don't know what exactly their reach on is on it, but it's enormous. There are people who I'm like, you read Marginal Revolution, okay?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, yeah, that's one that I keep up with, and I know I'll get good econ.
hmm.
And
And if have you listened to his podcast, Conversations with Tyler?
you've listened to some of
I've heard of some of
those.
them.
I mean, his reach, even outside of the economic is really
MRU,
far.
marginal I mean, like in terms of the Marginal Revolution University, those videos that they do, in terms of making the world more economically literate, which is something we all want to do. It's part of why we're here and doing
That
this.
actually sounds like a press release. They win for making the world more economically literate.
We're trying to do this, but like as well. But in terms of who are the superstars on making the world, that's an off the wall one. It won't happen, but I think it should happen. That's my off the wall one.
I feel like I don't know if I could top that. That's
really good. So I'll throw this one out, and I'm stealing it. Actually, Tyler mentioned it. Is Vitalik Buterin, the guy who created Ether, and he writes on monetary economics sometimes. I mean, if you create your own currency, that seems that's pretty cool. He's really, really young, though. I think he's maybe younger than all of us. Certainly younger than I am.
all right. I'll give you a weird one then. Right.
Cool.
This will be no way they're winning, but we'll go with Billy Bean and the Moneyball Revolution. We'll throw some guys in there of applying economics to things you wouldn't have thought as economics. I don't know.
Who was the guy who started sabermetrics?
Oh yeah, okay, there we go. Yeah, the sabermetrics guy. I can't think of his name.
I know.
They mentioned it in there, but
sure. And I used to.
Yeah, we'll give Billy Bean, Peter Brand, and the sabermetrics guy.
Yeah,
revolutionizing economics. Bill James. There you go. In sport, right? That's never gonna win. But would be I'll frame it in the same sense as what Matt was saying, right? Like that. I mean, that introduced. Actually, maybe Matt, I'll add into your spreading the econ part is even if you said like Stephen Levitt, right? Of Freakonomics. I don't think there's. I'd say Freakonomics and Moneyball might be the two things that nearly every student comes into an economics class like they know something about it. I mean, they may not know exactly what they know about it, but like it's shocking how many people still ask about those things, and those books and movies are old. To our students, they're old. But I mean, they are semi-versed in economics just from those ideas.
Yeah. Those are interesting ones.
Really.
So if there's a betting market on those, I would expect at least 10,000 to 1 on any of these.
Oh, yeah.
So
I'll put a couple dollars down then. I will.
It'd be
as long as it's those can win at any point in the future.
Yeah,
right.
1 year I'd put down $2. It'd almost be worth losing the $2 just for the
story.
The swing of the episode.
Story.
We find this podcast. We go back and search and go, I called it. We were right.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everybody listening. I'd encourage you. We will put the announcement in the description here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great story about a town that was basically split in half between Arizona and Mexico. And I think that's very much worth seeing. I think it's somewhat the same story as the North Korea, South Korea story. But institutions, the rule of law, private property, these are life and death matters. And in that respect, I think this was a great prize. But we have to get going pretty soon to go across campus to where Brian's going to be dazzling our K-12 teachers. And I just need to say hello. But any closing words of wisdom from either of you?
We can remove Acemoglu from the potential list for next year for 2025. That's one less guest that we're used to putting on the list.
Right.
Yeah. Very cool.
And there's still plenty of time for all of us to write those papers to get our names at least on the list, right?
Well, I don't know that there's anything more to say. I'm speechless. So that would, yeah. No.
John List and Matt Rosu for experimental economics.
There it is.
No.
Will he still do the podcast after he wins the Nobel Prize?
My question is, will he stay at Susquehanna? That's the real question. Or is he going to get plucked to go to Chicago?
It's big econ. Big econ is ruining the world, right? We've
a little part of me thinks Matt would stay at Susquehanna just to stick it to him.
Yeah. I want to say thankfully, I won't have to worry about so I won't have to worry about
Not
that
next year.
decision.
Not next year.
Not next year, yeah.
But if you go on
But-
that sabbatical, it'll be
Right?
that we're expecting big things.
I-
You need to put
sabbatical
out
is
24
happening.
papers on your sabbatical.
The sabbatical is happening in the spring semester, so the papers will be there. But no, thanks to everybody for listening. Love your comments on who should be the next Nobel Prize winners, or who you were, it might be related if you were disappointed that somebody didn't get it this particular year. And we'd love a 5-star review on your favorite podcast provider to help others find it. But until next time, gentlemen,
Bye, guys.
cheers with the water
Very-
and the
very
coffee
weak
and the
cheers
soda.
here. Cheers.
Cheers.